not Guy Nohra, but he is here. I am filling in today on layman's terms to interview you. My name is Luke Twombly. I'm normally one of the people behind the screen, finding the many great guests we have. Um, but today we decided to give our guests a little more background on who Guy is, his background, not just in business, but personal faith, overall philosophy. So we sat down for 45 minutes to an hour to kind of dive into this thing. And Guy, I'm sorry for stealing the mic, but you're in the guest chair today, so mea culpa.
I'm actually looking forward to this because I learned through the bunch of episodes that we've done that it's a lot of work to actually be the host.
Yes,
So,
there's a bit more research involved. There's all this stuff, and it's easier to know about yourself than it is about other people. Ironically enough,
exactly.
you kind of
And
have to
then
do a bit of a report before.
when do you cut in? When do you not cut in? What points do you emphasize, especially given what we're trying to achieve, which is help, lay people understand complex issues. So, yeah, so this is fun. This is like I'm very relaxed.
Okay, well, perfect. All right. Well, just I think we should start at the very beginning because that's typically a good place to start. Overall, your story's been in a very American story, even though it didn't start in America. But a lot of great Americans didn't start in America. You came of age during the Lebanese Civil War, moved to the U.S., became a top venture capitalist. If you could just choose 3 to 4 key moments of your life looking back, if it was a movie, what would you think those moments would be?
That's a great one. I'm going to say there was a moment uh, at St. Joe's Catholic Church. That was the first one. When I was 15, 16, when I realized that I can actually become an American. And why do I say that? Because you know, um, the Catholic Church is incredibly diverse. So
Mm-hmm.
I come from overseas. I'm expecting to see 6'2" blonde surfers everywhere in America, and I go to St. Joe's and I see Hispanics, I see German, I see Filipinos, I see Irish, I see Italian, and I'm like, wow, because I'm mixed, as you know, and
Mm-hmm.
I was like, you know what, I can definitely fit here, and that was like the moment where I decided that assimilation is is my big goal. So that was the first time. The second time I would say was, since I was a minor, my mom and later my dad had to go through the actual legal process of becoming a citizen. And but somehow, because I had crossed 16 when we did the process, I went along and they interviewed me as well, and I also had to take the test.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it all culminated in when I was 23 years old in 83 when I became a U.S. citizen. And that is still one of the proudest days in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just a amazing experience this way. Um, you know, Beyond that, I think instead of giving one example, I'm going to give just the kind of the serendipity of life, which again I believe is usually coming from God. Uh, I didn't know when I was applying to colleges, I had no idea uh, the difference between Stanford, Princeton, and San Francisco State. I was just going to apply to colleges,
Mm-hmm.
and I was incredibly fortunate that I got into Stanford, and that was a big deal. And the same thing when I became a venture capitalist after going to University of Chicago for business school. It's an incredibly difficult job to get. They probably hire, I don't know, maybe back then at least maybe 10 people a year. And every business school graduate from the top 10 business schools wants to become a venture capitalist or wanted to. And again, it just serendipitously happened. I got the right introduction to the right person, and it worked out. So I'd say that's probably another event. And then the last one, not the last one, because so being a venture capitalist for 35 years and investing in life sciences, I got to learn a lot about, of course, life sciences and healthcare. And I've always questioned myself as where's my value add to society, to the world? Because again, assimilating to me also meant that I wanted to give back. And I tell a story on the road when I'm doing my speeches about one of the technologies we invested in as a firm that actually cured cancer. And only on 10 years later, until I've been meeting patients that have used this technology who have healed, have I realized what a big deal that was. Whereas back then, to me, it was a job, and we had to make a decision, and we had to make an investment, and so on. So and the last one obviously is running for governor. Uh, in retrospect, so the problem with venture capitalists like me is that we invest in companies that are going to cure cancer. And when I started investing in companies that cured cancer, you were probably a toddler back then.
Yeah.
Basically, people said, we're all going to die from cancer. So here we were throwing in all this money into these diseases that supposedly are uncurable. So with that mentality is when I threw my hat in the ring to run for governor in the state of Nevada. And the positive about this is that maybe you catch lightning, but most of the time, realistically speaking, statistically speaking, um, you're probably not going to win.
Yeah.
So that bias of mine, which was that, hey, if you can cure cancer, you can win an election as an outsider, meaning a non-politician who had just moved in 8 years ago. So, I learned a lot by meeting people, by talking to people, by giving speeches. So I think these are probably the moments that have really, really had the biggest impact on my life. And of course, last but not least, I worked uh, with the NVGOP to get President Trump elected in Nevada. And it was the first time the Republican won Nevada since 2004.
Hmm.
And I was a senior advisor to the head of the NVGOP, who happened to also be the West Coast person for the Trump campaign, Trump 47. And uh, you know me well enough. I'm not arrogant, but the only difference between all the elections in 2004 and 2024 was me.
Yeah.
Everything else was constant. The same people doing the same thing, trying to get Republicans elected and president. And there was one time that it worked.
Yeah.
So,
Let the cards fall where they lie on that one.
yeah.
Um, but all those all great moments, and just well, it's heartwarming. It's the first one was at a Catholic church, and that actually, and then when you talked about curing cancer, all these new developments, it actually kind of leaned into my next question perfectly, very organically. How did your faith influence you on making the decision? Because when you're a venture capitalist, there's tons of options. Why'd you start going down the biotech route? Was it just dollars and cents? Was there an interest? Was there a passion? Were you informed by your history, your faith? What brought you there?
That's a great question. So the section I missed about my history is after I graduated from college, my first job, ironically, was in Asia, where I was selling medical equipment uh, there were US made high tech companies that did not have their own export department. So we were a trading company on their behalf, and we were
Hmm.
selling their equipment. My territory was Korea all the way down to ASEAN. and including China. This is 1983, 84, 85. So there's nothing going. This China was just opening. So I learned a lot about the medical device, medical technology space from selling medical equipment. And then when I, became a venture capitalist, it just made a lot of sense for me to be on the healthcare side,
Hmm.
on the life sciences side. Ironically, um, if you look at the returns, um, or at least the challenge of the returns on the IT side, somebody comes up with an app that's a messaging app, and they sell the company for $16 billion.
Yeah.
I try to cure cancer, and the highest return we've ever had on a company was, and it's the highest in biotech since then, was our cancer company that was 12 billion. Facebook is a social media platform, 500 billion or whatever their market cap is. So it's a lot harder in my space to make money. So it was definitely not driven by monetary uh, incentives.
No, well, that makes sense, and it's definitely doing more good than Facebook. I know that you can just look at people's mental health stats with social media, and we all have crazy relatives. Or the best way to check in on your insane friends from high school is to just open Facebook, and you'll know
Exactly.
exactly what's going on. Uh,
Exactly.
well, moving on from that, then, when you came to the States with your family, what was your first feeling interaction? Did you know English before? Did you learn English here? What was that whole process coming from Lebanon to the States?
So I was fortunate. My dad worked he was an executive at an airline, and I had my maternal grandmother lived in England, so every summer we went to visit her.
Hmm.
So I was fairly well spoken in English, albeit I had a probably more of a British accent than an American accent. So I was okay with the. I mean, I had an accent,
Hmm.
but the English part wasn't that difficult. It was just adjusting to some of the nuances of the American dialect, if you like.
Yeah,
Uh,
well, I hate to interrupt, but just I deal with a lot of foreigners and work and things like that. And the hardest thing is, even if they speak great English, we're a language of idioms. We love stupid expressions, and that learning those must have been a nightmare.
It took me, okay, so because I wanted to assimilate, I did all I could to understand. So to give you a good example, and this one, so I was 17 and a half,
Hmm.
and I had a crush on this girl, and in high school. And she said to me, "I'll see you later." Now, in America, see you later means bye. Literally, see you later means I'm going to see you at some point in the next hours,
In the
days,
nearish future.
in the nearest future. Exactly. But see you later just means goodbye. So
Yeah.
I had to learn this. So there were like dozens and dozens of idioms like this that I had to go through. And I would get myself in kind of interesting situations all the time. Uh,
It actually wouldn't be a bad sitcom. Each sitcom focuses on a new idiom that some new immigrant has to learn, and the whole premise is a joke.
what I can make a list of them because actually one of them is in my book. It's a pretty funny one. I think people really enjoy it. But the other one that I didn't understand, and again, I know it's not necessarily an idiom, but do you know that until maybe the last 15, maybe 20 years, uh, TV talk shows were just an American thing, right? So, uh, coming here and watching Johnny Carson and Saturday Night Live, I had no idea why people were so much into this. It's like two guys talking, right?
And now you have
Saturday
a
Night
side
Live.
note. Kind of ironic.
Yeah, it's like here we are. But so again, it's like all of these different amazing. My gosh, I mean, they're just. I mean, I use them now all the time. So but I can tell you that every time one of them would come up, and in fact, we have this joke. uh, uh, a bunch of my volleyball buddies, they keep saying that I'm a sleeper cell, and that I've kind of, I've embedded myself into the United States. And whenever I miss something, you know, which is usually kind of an idiomatic thing,
Yeah, yeah,
they're like, gotcha,
yeah.
you
We
know.
knew it. Well, literally,
Exactly.
literally, one of my good friends is a first generation Chinese American, and we were on a camping trip the other week, and that is a running joke with him. We're like, "You're just deep cover CCP. Your family's just embedded you for the whole takeover. We know what's going on."
Exactly.
But he was thinking that's part of the assimilation process. First generation Ribby.
Exactly. It's part of it, and now I would say I'm probably 90% there. There are shows that people my age that used to watch that I didn't,
Mm-hmm.
because I just wasn't here. And they will bring it up. They'll bring up some of the, Little House on the Prairie and things like this, and I've never seen these shows. So,
I think you're covered on that. If you're digging yourself on that, you're fine. A lot of
okay.
people miss shows. My dad has a funny joke because he had all four of us kids in an 8 year window, and he said I basically didn't see any movie that wasn't a Disney movie for the whole '90s. He goes, I had to play catch up in the 2000s. He goes, it was a whole decade culturally. I was like, if it
Okay.
wasn't Barney or Winnie the Pooh centric, I was not involved, and so you're completely fine. Um,
Okay.
so let me see. I'm gonna I have these all lined up, all these questions, but as all conversations, they, organic, you flow with it. Um, when you mentioned, the valuations of that company and other things, what was you three-part question? What was the favorite company out of the 150 odd some you've been with that you worked on? What was your least favorite, and then what was the most successful?
Okay. So I look at, having been a co-founder of the firm, uh, all 180, I consider them my babies, even though they were followed by different partners within the firm of ours. But at the end of the day, the way we did it is you debate vigorously, and then once a deal is accepted, and is voted on, then we're all on board, and that's it. We know we all support it. That was the culture that I had set up.
Mhm.
So the most successful was the one I mentioned. It was called Kite, and it was
Yep.
sold to Gilead for $12 billion. But it was my partner's deal. It was my partner Farah's deal. And again, in some of my speeches, I talk about the actual decision-making process for that particular company, and my moral guidance uh, and leadership got the deal done because it was very controversial.
Mm-hmm.
Because gene therapy in general, this is a gene, it's controversial because bad things happen in gene therapy, and so you're always, one negative event away from total failure, and after spending so much money. So that was one. Favorite, it's hard. It's like your children. It's hard to have a favorite.
So it depends on.
Uh, yeah, it it
That's what
it
my mother would say.
exactly. But you can't point at one because um yeah, I struggle with favorite because um I and my personalities, like I lived and die every my personal portfolio, which was about 30 companies when my career was over, I lived and died by what would happen to these companies. And then of course our overall portfolio was very important to me. So I never really had a favorite. I'm the kind of guy who, you'll ask me about the successes and it'll take me a while to think about, but I can tell you about the failures in a second. Um, because in fact, it's interesting you say this. For whatever reason, 2 nights ago, I was just before I went to bed, I was thinking about the disappointments in my life in the venture world, and there were two specific companies that failed their clinical trials. That I mean, more of them did, but these two. One of them was a obesity company that we had that I was on the board of, and we put lots of money in that deal. And all of the initial data and all of the animal studies and all of the safety work up front showed that this worked. And then we ran a clinical trial, and I'll never forget. I was actually on vacation in Bora Bora, and I got a phone call in the morning, and my CO called and he said, "We failed the clinical trial." Like, what? I mean, everything we've
Just
seen
blind.
has been Mhm.
You were just
Totally blindsided. I mean, you never know. And of course, FDA gives you some really weird endpoints sometimes. So you end up patient selection, and people make mistakes, they're human. But anyway, I was flabbergasted because everything else we had seen. In fact, this company, we were selling product in overseas in Spain, and we had patients. I mean, I met patients that had this procedure done before and after, and I could just tell this thing worked really, really well. So from actual real life patients where it worked to a clinical trial that failed was just incredibly
well,
disappointing.
I hate to take us on a quick detour real
Yeah.
quick, but this just brings up another point that I actually wanted to bring up. How much different is it working with, regulators in Europe or the European Union and Asia than it is with the FDA?
Great question. When I was doing investments, which was in the last 35 years, um, we did most of the initial clinical trials, especially in medical devices, were done in the EU because there was a system in the EU where if you got one approval for one of the countries equivalent of the FDA, you could actually run a clinical trial and you could sell everywhere. So
Yeah.
it was easier to get your early clinical trials done in the EU, but then you had to do your pivotal trials in the United States. Because at the end of the day, it was an FDA clinical trial, and you wanted to make sure you got done in the US. About 5 years ago, the EU authorities decided that they were going to become like the FDA, and now companies either just bite the bullet and do it in the US, or Australia has become kind of a place where people go out and do some of the clinical trials.
Do you think COVID was one of the main reasons they decided to switch over?
No, it was before COVID. They were talking about it probably 10 years ago, and then they adopted it a couple of years after. They just didn't want to feel like they were less rigorous than
Yeah.
the gold standard, which is the FDA, and they felt that they were being taken advantage of. So I think the regulators overseas decided that we're just going to copy the FDA.
Do you think they were getting taken advantage of, or do you think they had a better system?
I thought they had a better system because this is what's very fascinating about to me, at least. I'm a free markets guy, so uh, all they cared about in Europe was safety. Show me that this product is safe, and then I'll give you the approval and good luck. And if it doesn't work, none of the socialized medicine NHS is not going to pay for it, right?
Yeah.
So now you either have a real product that works well, and you will get Germany, France, UK to pay for it, or if you just have a Me Too type of a product, uh, then very quickly you get competition because that process is very easily duplicated, and now you have competition. And guess what? Guess who wins? The patient, because the device that in the US under FDA approval, when you're the only person with FDA approval, you're charging $5,000 for. In Germany, it's now 750, or whatever the market's going to demand.
Yeah.
So I thought their system was better for themselves and their patients, but they felt they weren't being rigorous enough, and that's why they changed.
Well, this flows naturally into your most recent op-ed that got placed at the Blaze. You were talking about quite a few problems in the American bureaucracy. Um, when you saw everything that happened with COVID and kind of just the complete lack of trust in the institute, well, just the trust in the institutions collapse. Um, with all the flack RFK Jr. is taking right now and everyone else, what are your thoughts on that generally? Do you think they can reestablish credibility, or does some new institution need to get built? Because it's one of those not have I understand people's lack of trust. I did not get vaccinated. I totally understand it. But if there isn't a medical establishment to trust, it gets a little dark out there.
Yeah, I get really fired up about that particular situation because I lived in that world. And I remember um always thinking, so I was parallel to the IT VC world where they were disrupting everything, right? The internet came along and everything got disrupted. And then social media, and then then all these apps came along, and more things got disrupted. For example, Airbnb disrupted hotels. Um, uh, Uber disrupted taxis,
Yeah.
and on and on. There's always disruption going on, and it ends up being for the better for everyone. Correct? Somehow we don't disrupt government. We Government is the one constant that stays the way they were doing it 50, 60 years ago, and in particular NIH, CDC, FDA, HHS, they're just frozen and like whatever was going on, literally probably 5, 6 decades ago. And here comes, President Trump, who is a disruptor, which I think we definitely need in government. I'll argue forever that government needs to be disrupted because it's not efficient.
Mm-hmm.
And then specifically HHS. So these So you take the fact that they were not disrupted at all, and then you take what I think is public health malpractice over COVID. And this is just not me, on social media and the internet and all this kind of stuff. Me with my own experience. I have seen in my life a couple of hundred clinical trials. I understand biostatistics as well as anybody else anywhere else. And when the whole COVID thing happened, I was in Nevada and we had a Democratic governor who was following everything Newsom was doing in California. But within 90 days of when they shut us down, April, so 90 days is what, June, July, I had my own data collection that was showing me what is happening out there. And what was happening out there, and my data collection was from a bunch of different sources. And what was happening, and it became very, very clear that the majority, like 90% of the deaths, were happening in very old people and in immunocompromised people.
Or
Okay,
a
and that,
combination of both.
right? So that was a given, and I could have argued with anybody about this. So then my question becomes, why can't kids go to school when we know who's the most vulnerable and who should actually be getting the vaccine first? But then everybody else, educate, don't mandate. Tell people whatever you want about the vaccine and they can decide whether they want to take it or not. So I felt that public health failed us in that example. And then like the arbitrary 6 feet away from each other, they find out that that doesn't mean anything. And the one that really upset me was the masks,
Yeah.
because I again went out and I looked at every mask study that was out there. There are probably six that are credible. Six. Out of the six, there was one that had an okay signal out of Bangladesh where masks had a positive impact, i.e., they decreased the number of disease. But even then, it was in a specific population. So every single mask study ever ran, whether it was Danish study, the U.S. Army study, whatever they were, masks did not work because humans are humans. And then you force everybody to wear a mask and little kids to wear masks, who, by the way, had a 0.001 death rate when it came to COVID. Uh, I just got really, really upset about this.
Well,
And
and
then,
then the other fact is Fauci was on the record lying in the beginning. You don't need masks, just so they could buy. Like, even if it's just, you don't need to just say anything at that point. You don't even need to lie. You could just buy it in bulk. Like, you didn't need to lie to the public. That's another just ding against them in that department.
well, again, the whole establishment. So you know why he lied to the public initially? He said you don't need masks because he wanted to make sure that healthcare providers get masks first. So he didn't want you and me rushing out to buy masks and crowd out healthcare providers. But then once they got enough masks, then he's like, "Oh yeah, everybody needs a mask now." So it was just this So public health, as you saw in my op-ed, public health still has not been put to trial on what they put us through.
Well, Fauci's got a blanket pardon. Tons of people got blanket pardons. But at this point, I think we need, even if no one goes to jail, everyone needs to be dragged in front of Congress. And we need a full accounting of what happened, what went wrong. Because, government is naturally calcified. But whatever broke in the system, if there, God forbid, is another pandemic in our lifetimes, that needs to be fixed. Because if this was a SARS disease or something with a 40% death rate, 30% death rate, a real disease, most people aren't going to believe it at this point or until it's too late. It would be a disaster.
That's my biggest fear. Already you're seeing people not vaccinate their kids because they lied to us about that vaccine. And some of the vaccines are actually needed. So now here we are. We have maybe 30-40% of the population that doesn't trust anything that any of these authorities say. And no one ever came out and said, our bad, we made a mistake. That will
Even
never
a
happen
mea
again.
culpa would go a long way.
Even a mea culpa, exactly, exactly. Just everybody in public health come out and say, man, we're sorry, America, we missed it.
Yeah.
We missed this. We overreacted. We're human. Uh, you know, we need to earn. We need to re-earn your trust, and we're gonna start right now.
Yeah. Well, I was listening to a friend of mine, Marty O'Donnell, and he had an unbelievable. He cited an old like fable, like the boy who cried wolf,
Of
and
course.
he said the biggest tragedy of this, like the health experts or the boy who cried wolf, is it goes, the tragedy is at the end, the wolf eats the sheep suffer. So the medical
Mhm.
establishment, they cried wolf, all the villagers come out, he does it too many times, and finally when there is a wolf, who suffers? The sheep, the innocent, the general public. And we're at that point of the story where the general public won't believe the medical establishment if they cry wolf. And I thought that was just, again, it's a children's story, but it actually is a perfect metaphor for the situation.
That's chilling to me because, as you said, God forbid if there is another pandemic, uh, initially, no one's going to believe him, except, neurotic people that want to believe him. The
Yeah,
people who
some
still wear
people who are
masks at
still
the airport.
masking up and living in their house.
Yeah,
It's
and the ones who wear masks at the airport. I mean, it's just a way for neurotic people to actually be comfortable about their fear. But no one's going to believe them. And do you realize what that means? If it's a real problem, we're going to have more deaths and more damage than we ever would have if people would have still trusted the public health authorities. I
so
trust the American people.
no, listen, and again, I do too. I trust they won at the ballot box in a big way, and I think one of Trump's election, you could say Kennedy got him over the line with the Maha movement, and I think a big part of that is we want accountability for what happened to COVID, and we also want the FDA. instead of over regulating, like the drug needs to be perfect and all this stuff, how about we get poison out of cereal? Because, I look at an ingredient list box in England and then much longer here, the ingredient list here in the States, and I can't pronounce half the words. And
Yeah.
so it's one of those, it seems like the FDA and broadly just the health establishment is fine with feeding us poison, but over regulating other areas to death.
Yeah, so this whole I think my FDA piece also talks about uh, they have way too much to do. They do
Mm-hmm.
food and drugs, and I think we should probably separate these two
Mm-hmm.
because just have it be simpler. Maybe move food to agriculture and keep drugs with the FDA because they just can't. They no bureaucracy can be in charge of such a huge piece of especially of health like healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so the thing that with food is that that's its own for at least in the United States, it's its own huge liability for our society, and it's really just happened over the last 100 years, and it's about the industrialization of food, and it turns out that that's not a good thing, and all these ingredients they put in that are necessarily not its color, and it's
Preservatives?
uh, like structure. You want something to be crunchy because
Yeah.
crunchy is good. Well, if you're going to put three different chemicals to make it crunchy, I'd rather have it not crunchy and be safer and not be exposed to carcinogens. And that's
Yeah.
all. That's all RFK Jr. is trying to do. And my gosh, you think he's he wants to destroy the world the way some of these people act.
Well, there's a lot of money on the table.
Lots of money. By the way, you know what's fascinating to me is that
Mm-hmm.
if you right now went out and researched pharma donations to senators, the top six are Democrats.
Oh, I believe that. Because it was
I'm blown
it's
away.
well, it's been so funny because in my lifetime, I always remembered like Republicans were the party of big business, but with COVID and just, I think it started before that. They were splitting donations to both, but since COVID, it's big pharma is completely in the house of the Democrats because
Yep.
they know those are the only people who are going to hold the line on them just for anti-Trump. Because health should, you think, the most bipartisan issue like. I can argue with my friend. I'm a Catholic. I can argue with my friend who's a Protestant or Jewish or Hindu about religion. I can argue with people about politics, about, gun rights, all this other stuff. But if it comes down, we want healthy people living healthy lives. That should be a layup for everybody. And the fact that it's political is insane.
And what's even more crazy is that um, Democrats, as we all know, uh, hate 90% gross margin businesses.
Yeah.
And pharma, by definition, is one of the big 90% gross margin businesses. So for pharma to be aligned with the Democratic Party, like Elizabeth Warren, I mean, I think she's like the third highest that she gets money from them. Um, these at least the Republicans want you to compete and see if you can win based on competition. And then if you have one drug that gets approved, then we get four more drugs approved, and then the price goes down. Um, Democrats want to put you out of business. They
Yeah.
don't like that you make so much money. And, and yet the pharma establishment and the science establishment is all on that side, which is why they missed COVID, which is why it was such a huge problem for normal people like us.
Yeah.
And I was in the midst of the whole thing, so I'm probably one of the few voices that can actually make sense out of this and make
Well,
the
you're
opposite.
one of the few guys in the butcher shop who makes the sausage. So you saw what they were doing and you knew something was wrong. because because
Absolutely.
because a lot of people, it's just one of the things. A new pills show up at CVS, or your doctor recommends something new. It's what. they're not watching the whole process start to finish. It's just when it comes
Exactly.
to market, that's the closest they're going to be to touching it.
Exactly. And I used to be a big, drug development and drug discovery, drug development is a huge endeavor, and it costs billions of dollars, and most of them fail. So there's nothing easy about it. So the argument that they make is, well, the reason why we have 90% gross margins is because, for every one that works, 20 fail, and they fail after we've spent a lot of money on them. So it's an argument that kind of makes sense. But the irony of this whole thing is that you've had, in the last couple of years, the first president to actually say something about drug prices was President Trump. He's the first one who's actually trying to do something about it when it's a democratic issue.
Oh, I remember Obamacare loud and clear, and I just remember everyone's premiums went up, everyone got hit,
Yep.
and it hasn't made anyone's life easier.
Nope.
So
And this is the first time.
yeah, they used to own it. Well, and this kind of dovetails perfectly into my next point. So when you came to America, you're working on assimilating, you're chasing pretty girls, you're trying to pick up all the idioms. When did you decide you were a Republican?
Great question. Again, so Luke, you're religious as well. When I was probably 8 years old, I decided that I had faith.
Mm-hmm.
Before First Communion, and all of these things were just symbolic,
Formula everyone.
but I had faith. You know.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember being when Ronald Reagan ran against Jimmy Carter, which would have been, was that 1980, right?
1980 on the nose.
Yeah, so 1980, and I'm at Stanford, and 80% of teachers and professors and people around are for Jimmy Carter. And I'm watching the debates and I'm paying attention, and I keep thinking, man, I agree with this guy on everything
Mm-hmm.
instinctively, right? I don't know things yet. I've only been here 5 years, but instinctively, I'm listening to President Reagan say things, and it's common sense, and it's about it's responsibility. It's less regulation, and I thought, I don't know what's wrong with everybody else here, or actually, it was more like, I don't know what's wrong with me.
Yeah.
That I'm seeing this, and at that moment, I became a closet Republican. And of course, the first time I voted was 4 years later, because I had just gotten I was naturalized in '83, and it just it just made sense. Everything. I mean, to me, everything that the conservative movement wants always made sense. And a lot of the things on the left, some of the things on the left that I saw, as an outside person, were like, yeah, okay, that maybe, yeah, maybe. But most of the things on the left I just instinctively didn't make sense to me. And it was really about instincts.
So do you think growing up, how old are you when the Civil War started in Lebanon?
I had just turned 15.
Okay. So as someone who, saw a country that was, relatively peaceful descend into chaos, like, how much did that inform your politics, and how much do you feel like Americans take general stability for granted?
Great topic, because this is the topic of my next book. Uh, it's called Not on My Watch.
Yeah.
Uh, and it's basically how quickly civil war can happen, and how your normal life immediately disintegrates into just urban warfare in my case. So I think what worries me about the United States now is that I read in a lot of different places that this is as divided as we've been since the Civil War, and it doesn't take much, especially when you have extremists, uh, kind of provocateurs, you know,
Hmm.
pushing that process. It doesn't take much to get things in a very, very bad place. And you see it, I have a whole thesis about this, and but you see it in whether it's social, whether it's political, whether it's judicial. You just see it. You see it. You feel it, and then you. In my case, it's like a eerie deja vu.
Really, it's full deja vu.
Eerie, yeah, yeah.
All right. You don't have to answer this next question, but is it just like what was the hardest experience you had during the Civil War? And when did your family decide we need to leave?
Um, they're kind
It's
of
hard to leave your homeland. I can't even
they're
imagine being forced to leave America.
they're almost related. I had a particular uh, tough night of battle, and I came back home, and I'm told I stayed in my room for 3 days and didn't talk to anyone or say anything, and just didn't communicate. And then when I felt better, I actually went back out to continue to serve. But after those 3 days, my parents decided we need to get him out of here.
Hmm.
And that's when the decision happened, because I was probably catatonic. I don't know. I mean, I all I know is that I've been told that. All I know is that this happened. I remember walking home, and then I remember
You
anything until I
blacked
was
out a good chunk of it.
pretty much especially the post. And then I remember going back out because I thought they needed me, and I couldn't let people down. But then within a couple weeks, my parents just I was actually on the front, and my commander came over and said, "Come with me," and I went with him, and then he took me home. He said, "Okay, you're gonna go upstairs to your parents now, so you follow orders."
Hmm.
And they had everything packed, and they're like, "You're leaving with your mom and your sister, and we'll we'll we're gonna sneak you out of here into the other side of." I had to go through the west side of town, which was the enemy, to get through to the airport. And unlike a lot of my colleagues, which is an irony, everybody wears those not
Hijabs or
masks, the things. I never wore mine. I
oh
was like,
really?
yeah, I was like, you know what? I'm at a checkpoint and I'm stopping people, and they see me, they take my picture, they take my picture. I couldn't wear those friggin' thing. It was like June, May, June, it's hot. I'm not gonna wear a black thing that hides my face.
Oh,
So
balaclava. I think that's the term.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So yeah, so they had to sneak me out that part of town and hope that nobody would recognize. So
Uh, was your mother just praying that nobody? Did you get stopped, or did you just go right through?
I think we got stopped at two checkpoints.
Hmm.
Uh, One was Lebanese army and they were neutral. The other one was PLO, and they harassed us a little bit, but it's not like there was the internet and they could put your picture everywhere. I don't
Yeah,
even
yeah.
know if people had my picture. So it was just, you know, being safe. But yeah, that was it. And then we stayed one night in the west side, and then the second morning I went to the airport.
And did you fly directly to the States, or you go to England first?
We went to England first, and then ironically we took Pan Am 103 from London to Seattle, and that's the Lockerbie flight.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, two things I haven't heard in a minute: Lockerbie and Pan Am. So this.
And I know you're young, but I know you're very smart, so I know you know these
Yes, no,
things.
I'm aware of everything, but I haven't heard
Okay,
those words in a minute.
yeah,
Um, so I may have missed it. How long were you in England for? Just a couple days, a week,
just one day.
just one day. That was it.
Yeah, Yeah,
Stayed
just
at your
one day.
grandmother's and then went stateside.
She had passed away by then,
Oh, I'm
so
sorry.
we didn't stay. So we just it was just one day to change flights. There were no direct flights from Lebanon to the U.S.
Yeah, I could imagine that's the case.
That's why
So
people had to stop in Iceland when they had to go to Europe. They were
yes,
the planes didn't have the range yet.
yeah, that is funny to think about. God, amazing time we live in. I don't even have to consider that. I flew directly from Dallas to Rome the other day, which was fantastic. I can't stand layovers as a policy, but
Oh God, I know.
yeah. So wait, so then when your parents made this decision, was there? And again, my family's been in America since the 1640s, so
Oh,
yeah, we've been
yeah.
here a minute. So we haven't had to deal with this so much. Obviously, there's some Irish and some other immigrant groups that we married into and all this stuff, but my father's side, direct lineage all the way through. How did you guys pick what state to end up in, or was it kind of assigned by the government? What was that process look like?
So I had an aunt who was married to an American gentleman who lived in Alameda, California.
Mm-hmm.
So we just joined her. So my mom and my sisters initially joined her and my cousins. So we had already a place built in as far as where we came. And she's the one who sponsored us. We got sponsored. So
Yeah.
you never know, the immigration laws, which need to be obviously, I think, adjusted for today's world. Back then, you could be sponsored if you had a relative who, like a close, like a brother, sister, mother,
An immediate
So
relative.
yeah, so my aunt sponsored my mom, and since we were the kids, I think we were also um, included. But this is a nuance you will appreciate being political scientist and wonk. The word is that the reason why. So we were fighting the PLO, and the word is that the U.S. State Department had made immigration of Lebanese Christians very easy into the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
because they assimilate, and they're in Ohio and they're in New Hampshire and they're in Tennessee, and the Lebanese people everywhere in the United States. They assimilate, and so the word is that Henry Kissinger had decided that we get the Christians either thrown into the Mediterranean Sea by losing the war
Mm-hmm.
or through mass immigration, and then we give Lebanon to the PLO and we solve the Palestinian issue.
Whoa, Kissinger had that position.
That's realpolitik for you.
That
And
is
of
well,
course,
well. Kissinger's got one of my favorite quotes of all times, which is, "It's a shame both sides can't lose." And it's good for football teams you hate when they're playing each other, or couples you hate when they're fighting, and 100 other good things.
so
But
yeah, so I think that it's never been proven that that's what he was thinking, but but it took guys like me that just kind of stopped it, and
yeah,
we stood, and then after me, of course, 10 more years of young men just stopping the onslaught, and then things got very
well,
complicated.
you're one of the reasons there's still a sizable Christian minority in Lebanon.
Yeah,
There could have been
yeah,
zero.
would have been zero. Yeah, I mean things would have been very different. Um, and I think that that's another. It's another. You kind of get into the whole. Uh, I mean, PLO also. I mean, they were mostly Islam.
Mm-hmm.
And they were, of course, even though they were not religious.
Explicitly.
They they always explicitly, yeah, they always, uh, every attack was always Allahu Akbar. You'd
Yeah.
hear that's what you would hear when they were coming at you. So, you know,
Yeah, well, a fish isn't a water supremacist, but it just swims in the water. So it's just
exactly, exactly, exactly.
it may not
Yeah,
know it, but it's just the
yeah,
case.
yeah.
We'll get to another point later, but just to double back, as an immigrant, looking at immigration broadly, what do you think America should do? we've got 55 million people on visas in the country right now, between 20 to 30 million, maybe 35 million illegal immigrants. That puts, if there's 330 million Americans, that's one out of every five or one out of every four people in the country are foreigners.
Yeah.
As someone who's naturalized citizen, obviously you're kind of the dream story. Come here, assimilate, become successful, all this good stuff. We don't want to end things like that in America. But what do you think the current fix is? Because it, speaking as someone who's been famous, been here since the 1640s, it feels like we're drowning a little.
I've never understood why Congress or Congresses over the last since 1986 when they did the Simpson Act, it was supposed to be immigration reform. I don't understand why Congress hasn't taken this issue very seriously and tried to adjust to the times. Immigration, just like everything else, it's not static, it's dynamic. And the United States has to have certain laws that dictate how immigration happens. And right now, whatever laws we have are obviously being taken advantage of and or ignored by
Mm-hmm.
like the Biden administration, right? So I think we need to Congress has to sit down and decide what does immigration look like for the next 100 years into this country, and what are the new rules, and how are we going to enforce them? And that's it. We don't stop because we're a nation of immigrants, but we can't be an open door either. So
Yeah.
I think it should be taken. I don't know why Congress has never done that. I never understood sanctuary cities. Never. I still kind of just scratch my head when I first heard, remember. So that's another idiom that I learned when I was there. I'm like, sanctuary city. What does that mean? They're like, oh, that means illegal immigrants can be here and they can be safe. I'm like, who gives you the? Is this a country or is this not a country? You know,
Yeah.
where does this end? Where does the slippery slope end? Can we say that I'm gonna have a sanctuary city for people who don't want to pay their taxes? I'll go live there, right?
Yeah. If we're
Can we
just
say
breaking federal laws, let's break the income tax law.
yes? So these are some of the things that just need to. I think they need to sit down and figure it out. And I've never, not once have I heard Congress, except this joke of a bill they wanted to pass 2 years ago. Not once have I heard Congress say we're going to do immigration reform since 1986.
Yeah, and again, and that one, and even Reagan, who I love. He actually that was the guy who convinced my father to vote Republican the first time as well.
Okay.
But he did amnesty in California. It was all about we're gonna. This is it. We're just doing this one time, and then we're gonna basically fund the wall, fund border patrol, and that never happened. The first act
Nope.
happened, and now we're in a worse position than we were
Yep.
before.
Yep. And there's always this amnesty aspect because the other side figures out that there are so many people in here that the American people, because of their good heart, will not want people to get just kicked out. And
I think that patience has been worn quite thin.
I think the administration is being really smart about it
Yeah,
because they're just going so far for illegal criminals.
yeah.
I worry about the day it starts becoming, you know, normal illegals who live in the neighborhood, and now you're kicking mom and dad and kids and so on. I don't know if they're gonna have if the people will have the stomach for that. And
Well,
that's
I think they're closer to it than you think, but I also think the administration's doing it in a smart way. Like they've just proposed putting illegals out of Section 8 housing, which was crazy. I didn't know they were on Section 8 housing. Like when you tell people that you're like, you mean people who came here illegally with this? I thought this was for our poor people, not for other people's poor people. Like,
exactly.
So just,
So
and I think removing benefits that somehow they're getting access to, and then do you think there should be some prosecution or tax penalty for people who hire illegal immigrants for labor?
you see that?
Because it's
Yes.
an incentive instead of harming individuals.
So to me, the last 3 4 years when we had this uncontrolled influx, people would always say, oh, the Democrats, the Democrats, and it's the left, it's the progressive. Yes, but if but I always thought it was a plot between the left, the far left, and big business to screw middle and lower class America.
Yeah.
Not phrased this way, right? The outcome was that that's what happened. But
Well, and
but
the purpose of a system is what it does.
exactly. They wanted cheap labor, and who gets hurt the most by cheap labor? Poor Americans.
And then the
Um,
other fact is that it helps drive into the housing crisis as well.
and
You've
everything,
got
everything.
if you've got 30 million people, even if they're renting low rental housing, that still inflates the price everywhere else up the ladder.
Up and down. And so to answer your question, I think there should be severe penalties for employers who knowingly hire illegals. Because if it's like drugs. If there's no demand, there's not going to be a supply. Because if people cross the border and they can't get jobs, they're not going to cross the border.
Well,
The
so
only
that we need
reason
to
they
stop the magnet.
yes, and you just and hurt them. I mean, I'm thinking huge fees.
Yeah.
You pay for every illegal you hire you some kind of a reparation for a legal person who didn't have that job.
Yeah. No, because what's the point of having a minimum wage if you can pay someone under the table?
Exactly,
You make it
exactly.
illegal for Americans to perform that job at that price point.
Yes, and then and just think about again. I mean, what is the society guy? How do you judge a society, but how it treats its most vulnerable. What did we do to our most vulnerable? We took away their housing, we took away their jobs, we took away their pride, we took away their honor, and we gave it to people who just happened to be close enough to walk across a border.
Yeah.
Geographical proximity. It had nothing to do with anything else. Geographical proximity. That's it. That's
That-
just
No, it was a convenience factor. Because if like it was if we really wanted to bring in the world's poorest people, we'd ship them in from the
yep.
Congo, or we'd go to like a war torn country in Asia and do that. But
Yeah.
that's not what happened.
No. No. It
Well,
you know anyway.
then now that we've hit on immigration, let's really hit the can of worms. The Middle East. Do you have a
Yeah.
solution?
Um so if we go back to history, uh after World War One, when the Ottoman Empire fell, uh, two very mediocre functionary diplomats called Sykes-Picot, one French, one English, decided that they were going to carve up the Ottoman Empire's Middle East, Levant and Middle East pieces based on I don't know what. So the French got Lebanon and Syria, and the English got everything else. And then they just started making up countries based on, again, there's no logic. For example, why don't the Kurds have a country?
Yeah.
Right? They were spread out, but if you look at them, it's pretty homogenous where they were, but they end
Yeah.
up in three different countries. So that's the first question. Uh, why did Lebanon end up being what it was when in fact historically Lebanon has been Mount Lebanon from the north of the Cedars down to the Litani River along with the Bekaa Valley. So why did you add all these coastal cities that people didn't necessarily, Tripoli, Tyre, Sidon, etc. Anyway, so just a historical bungled process, which basically, I go back to my background, uh, it was bad DNA from day one in the
Mhm.
region, right?
Yeah.
The region was born with bad DNA. So there are two solutions. This I'm going to be very, very general. There are two ways to have a solution. The first one was what we did the last 100 years, which hasn't worked, which is just create these countries and hope that they will gel and that things will work out. Well, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon tells you it didn't work. Okay? Each one of these places has had huge civil wars because you had too many different people. The flip side, okay, so that's one, and that's one that the State Department believes in, and Arabists in the State Department believe in, and I'd even say some of the people in the Trump administration believe in. The other approach, which is always criticized because, oh my gosh, it's a Zionist plan because they want to make everybody weak, is either federations everywhere or statelets that create their own set of uh, their own set of relations with their neighbors.
Yeah.
Because the reality is that you have probably 7 different groups that live in these areas that don't necessarily play well together.
Yeah.
So why not give each one of them a state, or if you want to do a federation, why don't you give each one of them a canton?
Hmm.
And those groups are the Kurds, the Lebanese Christians, the Sunni, the Alawis, the Druze, the Shia in that area. So that's how you do it. And they happen to be pretty homogenous where they live. So
Hmm.
it's a doable thing. But everybody says it's a Zionist plan because if those countries are divided, then Israel can control them all because they're the biggest kid on the block. Well, guess what? They
They
haven't
already
been
are the biggest
divided.
kid on the block.
They haven't been divided, and they're kicking everybody's ass. So it doesn't
Yes.
matter, right? Um, so I wish this is the thing we talk about all the time. I mean, I wish I could spend, I don't know, 2 hours having this conversation with whoever is in charge in our administration, and they owe me that because I did win them Nevada, so I can do what I just did with you, which is what we've done hasn't worked.
Well, you know what the definition of insanity is.
It's doing the same thing over again, right?
Expecting different results, 100%. And
Every
unfortunately, we've got pretty much almost a century of data points at this juncture, knowing it doesn't work.
exactly, you know, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq. Um, you know, uh, Iran is not as homogenous as we think they are. So that there could be some trouble there as well. Saudi has a very large Shia minority. Bahrain is a majority Shia, but ruled by a Sunni
Mhm.
family, and on and on and on and on. I mean, we have to stop paying attention that this is a very clannish system, and the best way in the new world to deal with the clannish system is probably some kind of either a federation or just a bunch of
Well, and
statelets.
also meeting people where they are. They're not going to become liberal democracies like France. That took several revolutions to get there.
Yep,
And it's one of those like, and things just don't happen overnight. There's got to be a series of cultural events and generations to get to certain points.
yep. And the interesting thing about this is that if you follow the statelet theory, then there might be more cooperation, whether it's diplomatic, economic, and then you have a big brother who is Israel, and another
Yeah.
big brother who's Saudi Arabia, that can actually, one guy's got the cash and one guy's got the technology, and everybody else could kind of make it work.
Yeah, and
Uh,
if people feel secure in their own region, it could really open
exactly,
it up to conflict.
exactly, exactly. And and if you don't force people to live together in a space and they each have their own area, then why, we're back to, kind of a equilibrium of terror, if you like. But at
Yeah,
least no one's going to do anything to each other. The Alawis are not going to fight against the Lebanese Christians, and Lebanese Christians are not going to fight against the Druze, and on, because everybody's got their little area. They're living there. They could do some kind of a UAE type deal
yeah.
where goods and services and people can move around, but you don't become a citizen.
I
Uh,
think that's a very good idea. I think that one. I think makes a lot of sense. It's
yeah,
tied to a specific area, and good fences make nice neighbors. That's been proven time and time again
yeah.
immemorial.
And money talks, and the Saudis have it, and
And
honestly,
I'd
the
say, and I'd
U.S.
say the new crown prince in Saudi Arabia, he seems very amenable to a stable Middle East.
Yeah,
He
yeah,
wants that to be the problems of the generation behind him. He's
ex-
trying to
exactly.
change the outlook of you know Arabia and the Levant generally.
If you watch everything he's doing, he's trying to emulate the UAE. And if I was, and again, in a position of any influence, I would say, what are the UAE doing that makes their population not be bloodthirsty against Israel? In fact, they have relationships with. When I flew to Israel, I took Emirates and I stopped in
Well,
Dubai.
the UAE is actually, I was reading a fascinating article. The UAE is actually kind of taken over the role of Switzerland almost, where
Yeah,
people go to meet there because Switzerland, when Europe was the world and that's the center of all the wars and troubles, Switzerland
right.
played basically the role the UAE does today.
Yep. But the key for me is how is it that their population never goes on the streets and yells and screams about Israel and how they hate Israel? How is it that their population actually? It was in front of me when I was at the airport because again I took an Emirate flight to Tel Aviv from here, the U.S. and the customs guy. There was an Israeli guy in front of me. The customs guy was like, "Yeah, welcome. Well, welcome to Dubai." I'm like, "This is what are they doing, and why can't we make everybody do it?" It is that would be a case study I'd kind of put together if I was king for a day or whatever. It's like how you guys done it because
It's the same
you,
religion, roughly the same ethnic group, same temperament.
yes,
Like if they could do
yes,
it there, what was the difference on the ground or policy that led to that?
exactly. And I don't think they're not a police state. I mean, they're strict, but I'll give you an example. Like, how does the UAE? You go to dinner. Have you been to Dubai?
No, I'm trying to go early next year though for the first time. I've heard
Okay,
amazing things.
so you go to dinner in Dubai in a restaurant, and to the left there are, you know, 16 people, nine Russian models and seven guys and and the latest fashions. And to your right, there's a couple of UAE families, Emirati families, and the women are dressed, with and a burqa. I mean, not a burqa, but like
Yeah,
headgear and the black dress, right? And they're coexisting. I don't, they're not looking at them weird. They're not looking at them weird. It's like they're coexisting now. Why can't we do this everywhere else
yeah,
in the Middle East? So UAE is a case study that I think we should all pay a lot of attention to. And then if we do this, then we can do our statelets. And if we do that, then we can hopefully end up, to answer your question, how do you make peace in the Middle East? Try something new because the old stuff hasn't worked. And right now, I'm very disappointed that we're saying, "Oh yeah, this guy, the Al Qaeda guy who became an ISIS guy, who's now running Syria. Now he's a good dude. We gotta, let's work with him. He's gotta control his people if we're gonna
Well,
work with
listen,
him."
everyone who believes that, I've got some oceanfront property in Nevada to sell them.
Well, it's kind of the U.S. Stance right
I
now.
I I know it is, and it's one of those things. I love my country, but if I know anything, Uncle Sam is not great at foreign policy decisions. My entire life has been one rolling foreign policy disaster.
You're right. You're right. It's and you know, willing and able to consult.
Yeah. Well, we need to get you up there,
All
not
right.
just to the hill, but to talking to real bureaucrats who can actually move the needle. Well, listen,
Yep.
Guy, I hate to tell you that we're wrapping on your own show, but we are.
Oh
And
my gosh.
I want
Okay.
to say, hey, thanks so much. Great conversation. I hope we hit
Yeah.
on everything you wanted to. We only got to about half the questions I wanted to hit on because we took a
We'll
few
do
fun tours.
we'll do one in a couple of months. We'll do another one in a couple of months.
Yes. Well, we'll solve the rest of the world's problems then.
All right. Okay, Luke. Hey,
All right.
great talking to you.
My pleasure. Thanks
Um,
so much, Guy. I'll talk to you soon.
okay, bye-bye.